Anthony Kila. Professor Kila is also the Director, Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Good to be here. Good morning.
Good morning. So how is the increase in pawn price? How are you faring with it? Let's start with you first of all.
Well, let's start with me. I guess slightly worse than you. We're at the lower end of it here. I think it's a general problem for everybody, and it's very tough. As one might predict, what you have is increase in cost of transportation that then transfers to increase in cost of goods and services. It's tough generally. We were discussing just yesterday the price of delivering some letters to some organizations, and we were shocked at what the prices they put forward. But you can easily see why. The problem is the fact that you can see why it does not make it easy to understand or to manage. Maybe to understand, but not to manage. So this is a tough time for everybody.
Okay, Prof. It seems that people just want solutions. They're looking for a quick fix. Things are just getting, tougher by the minute. And people are coming out to say, well, look, this is not the time for, words, that government needs to do something immediately in the short run to cushion this effect, because more and more people are being thrown into abject poverty by the day. The government needs to act now, and all this talk about enduring this thing for the next 15 years and all that is just getting people even more upset. So what should government do right now, or is there anything government can do right now to actually cushion the very, very harsh effect of what Nigerians are going through as a result of what's its policy?
Well, I'll tell you one, a very radical view, which I hold barely, is to reintroduce fuel subsidy. But unfortunately for Nigerians, there's a general literature, a general mindset that says that fuel subsidy removal is inevitable and irreversible. I have never subscribed to that view. I remember about 10 years ago or so, many of us were cautioning against this removal of subsidy. Now, there are very few of us who are still on that line. Let me take a step back and say very clearly that the reason why some of us, at least I speak for myself, were clearly against the removal of subsidy is because 10, 12 years ago, before this thing happened, or even 15 years ago, before we got to this level, we saw the consequence. We could see, because we are trained to predict, to project, and to forecast what will happen in situations. We saw that the removal of fuel subsidy, at least the way it was being done, would lead to this kind of situation today. I say this because a lot of people who are with us then, and who went to streets and took President Jonathan's administration to the cleaners, I see them turning around now saying, well, yes, fuel subsidy removal is good. Everybody should deal with their conscience, and history will judge all of us. My position then was not personal, it wasn't partisan. It was just pure economics and love for country and concern for fellow citizens. And this is what we were trying to avoid. Where we are now, which I doubt this subsidy can be returned, partly because there's a mindset that says removing fuel subsidy is a good thing, partly because there's no money to manage it. But I argue, authority, you might manage it. To your question, what do we do? We've talked about what we have not done and the way we should have done. There is something going on here, which is a failure of leadership, the ability to see before events happen. And it's a crucial thing in strategic thinking, to be able to think, a few steps ahead, to say what will happen if we take this step, what are the possible outcomes. That is lacking here, because if you had that, you will have a plan in place. So we have to think from where we are, which is a tough way to think. The best way to think is to be able to think ahead, to say what will happen to us in 6 months, in 12 months down the line, in 4, 12, 3, 6, 12 months, then 10 years. We've missed that. So where we are now, we need to understand that the increase in prices is due to increase in the cost of production. services. And the major cost of that increase is the cost of energy. So we have two options. It's either we find a way, well, three options. It's either we find a way to lower the price at consumption level in the case of petrol, when you go to the pump, in the case of food, when you go and buy it, by subsidizing it, by stepping in one way or the other. That is one option. The second option is to increase the supply of goods and services by producing more. The third possible option is by diversifying our demand. So diversifying our demand will mean, for example, that we're going to have and use more public transport instead of everybody using their car. So that way, all the people not using their car will take away their demand from the fuel pump because many of us now will be using public transport. That is an example of that. In terms of food, in terms of goods and services like food or the services we use, diversifying our activities to reduce the pressure on demand will be perhaps we stop eating certain kind of food and perhaps we're forced to reduce the amount of money we spend on some services like makeup, maybe reduce the number of weeks of manicure or pedicure, the number of times we do massage, or the number of times we do something, whatever it is that we do, eat some food less. So we reduce that. That is in terms of varying demand to reduce cost. In terms of intervening to reduce cost by, Canadian intervention is perhaps to find a way to, say, for example, in every state, let us find 6 or 7 outlets of subsidized food where the government, the community goes behind to make the price of food lower. And very important here, not to give it out, because that doesn't make sense. That does not sustain the economy. This palliative thing that we talk about, very horrible word that we've allowed in our life, palliative. Palliative is when people are about to die, and that's why we're not getting results. But we need, instead of giving out, we need to reduce the price by subsidizing it for producers, either through fiscal policies, either through direct transfer, to make sure that when you go and buy it, the prices are low in some selected places that more people can reach. Not to get it for free, I repeat, but to buy it for less. The third option, as I said, is to increase the supply. That is not an immediate option. That will take making sure that producers of goods and services get access to capital, they're able to get access to their farms, they're able to use some perhaps specially arranged mode of transportation to get their goods and services from factory or the farm to the market and to the cities where people can use it. So that's a very direct approach to make that happen. But in all, there must be a mindset that we need to have some very quick policies to augment, to create goods and services, wealth, and job. And in the meantime, as part of increasing the supply, we could actually do a very critical thing, which is to import a lot of food. At the moment, less cement and more food. We can put a hold on some building and focus on getting food to the people.
Okay.
When you say import food, I mean, is that import food for sale or import food to, distribute to people who have fallen into poverty? Because if it's that's not much different from palliative.
Never give it out for free. Never give it out for free. Always for sale, so that it reduces the poverty. It reduces the prices, but it creates activities. Giving it out for free will cause corruption, will cause discrimination, nepotism. Some people will get it, some people will not get it. Some people will steal it and go and use it in their private parties. No, never give it out for free. You just make sure you have a lot of it and people sell it at lower prices. That is what you want to do.
All right, Professor Kila. I mean, in a related vein, a lot of people seem to think that, floating the naira was done by faith, and this assumption was definitely that devaluating the naira would automatically lead to improved, forex supply, etc., etc. But even if the model had predicted this, shouldn't there have been a back plan? and some sort of predictions to what we're going through.
Well, yeah, you're very right. You see, this is where leadership and strategic thinking comes in. Before you take a step, you need to be able to see. I mean, you're right. It's not fate and it's not love in that. Where you just see somebody and you throw yourself in and you see how it goes. It's not that kind of thing. Matters of public affairs, matters of the state. There should be a way to think it through that if we take option A, what are the possible consequences? If we take option B, what are the possible consequences? You see, unfortunately, we've gone for this devaluation you're talking about without taking into cognizance that devaluation of the currency works where the country is an export country, where we produce more and import less, where we export more and import less, where we produce more and we buy less. The problem we're having here is that we import almost everything we use in this country. So with a weak naira, we're in big trouble. It just means that what we have in our hand to buy the forex that we then use to buy our goods and services are not enough. We constrain it by devaluing. It's the wrong thought. I can see, the intention of the model, but I think they missed some details, as they say in economics.
So, I mean, again, in that area, where do you think the government can take this thing up from here? Because, I mean, there's still a school of thought. You said something about, maybe it might be a little difficult for subsidy reversal, but some people are really calling for drastic action. They say, look, I mean, your energy security, allowing your currency to float freely is a recipe for disaster. And, what Nigerians are going through now, you probably can't argue with such people.
Well, you can't argue with them because they talk from a place of pain. You can see why. There are two problems here. Number one is that the policy is not working, at least today. What is causing is pain. We're told that we should enjoy a bit of pain and at some point there'll be a solution. But there is pain today. They might be right tomorrow, and I really wish so. The other problem is that nobody's showing people the path to succor, the path to victory, or, the path to a better place. We just seem to be going and things are getting worse. When some while ago, some people predicted that the naira would get to this amount of 2,000 close to the pound sterling, or 1,000 something to the dollars. People said, "Oh God, those are doomsayers." And some of us try to warn them that be careful. These predictions are done scientifically. It's not that they just raise their hands to God and come up with this solution, and that we should be ready for it. That is missing. The radical solutions you're talking about perhaps, I assume you're thinking of defending the naira, reversing the fuel subsidy. It's tough where we are now because we also need to remember that the country is broke. We need to admit it, that there's no money in the coffers, and people argue that the little ones are not being spent judicially. I think that the leadership needs to come out to say, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Nigerians, things are tough, things are bad. This should have been done before, but here we are now. And then you can say, given where we are, look, these are the sacrifices that we need to make. And if we make it, this is what we're going to get from it. I would liken it, to the situation of managing a household, a family, where you gather together, father and mother and children, or father and mothers, depending on the family or whoever they are, around the table to say, situations are tough. So therefore, this year, there will be no holiday, there will be no birthday parties, and we shall limit for those of us in Lagos, we limit the number of Ashwebi that we buy. But what is going to happen is that for every Ashwebi that we don't buy, we're going to use that money to pay for junior's tuition. For every holiday we do not go to, we shall use that money to do something else. And perhaps instead of you guys, children that is eating this kind of special food, you need to go through this other food so that we can use that money in another side. We need to have that kind of conversation so that it prepares people and it shows them the sacrifice that need to be made and the possible result of that sacrifice. That will go a long way, and that has not been done. That would be a good way to start with. For example, let me tell you something radical because, since we're at it, I think, well, you guys are leading me to temptation, so let me go. I resist everything except temptation, as it were. You see, one of the things that should have been done is that immediately the government got in and saw the situation, there should have been an announcement to say, look, we're going to put a moratorium on the increase of tax, on the increase of salaries and the income of a lot of things for a short period so that we keep things down and we get results. That's the kind of thinking that should have helped us.
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about the consumers, what is important to them and is the stability, the dimension of stability, and they say there are three dimensions: quality, price, and quantity. And it's never been about quality now; it's about quantity and price. But I think that I wanted to take you up on what the World Bank said to the federal government to use oil wealth for Nigerians' welfare and giving 7-point agenda for economic turnaround. But how about looking inwards and looking at what Nigerians would want for Nigeria? I mean, like yourself, you've made a lot of recommendations in past conversations. Do you think it's the ideal to look at the World Bank's processes in terms of giving suggestions to Nigerians' economy at the moment?
Well, I think we should take into consideration, but ultimately we have to take independent decisions. Ultimately, who feels it knows it all. The World Bank, the World Bank, IMF, and all these bodies, they don't help themselves because they always tend to appear to be on the wrong side of the people. But because I've had contact with these people, I've been a consultant on some of their projects, they don't really mean evil. It's just that the way they reason, there's certain nuances of our society that they do not get. There's certain pain that they do not get. It is difficult for somebody who has no problem having 3 square meal and a bit of snack and throw out money for friends and strangers to understand the pain of somebody who's actually struggling to get 1 meal a day. When you see somebody struggle with 1 meal a day, there's a lot of things involved. It means such person cannot just walk into a hospital or pharmacy to check something that is not serious. At least that is not serious today, but that might kill your heart tomorrow. The view of the World Bank is a distant view that does not go to the nucleus. There's so many people studying Nigeria outside Nigeria that cannot understand how Nigerians really survive. Because they can't really get the nuance of somebody that meets you once and will chase you 5 times with their account number asking for money. Or that is on the side of charity. But there's also the side of entitlement that somebody would think, because you're their uncle or their aunt, you owe them everything they're going through. The cultural things are very difficult, to model if you're not part of that model. But because the World Bank has money, it has influence, it has some kind of experience, and it has connection, it is good for government to listen to them, but ultimately for government to then make its own decision based on its own reality. It's called text in context. You pick it up and then you domesticate it, and you come up with a reasonable solution. That is a bit missing for African countries. You saw what happened in Kenya when Kenya followed the advice of the World Bank in toto. When they saw trouble, they had to come back. So I think we need to be careful about it, about our relationship and how we adopt advice from others.
Okay, Prof, I think we're just going to have to leave it like that. I mean, definitely the issue is going to continue to burn for as long as Nigerians continue to feel the pinch. Many thanks for your time. We'll be speaking with political economist, Professor Anthony Kila. Professor Kila is the director of the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies. Many thanks for joining us, Prof.
Keep the faith up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, don't go anywhere. It's time for us to bring you our social media intervention, Kakaaki Social, and Rena will be joining us shortly after this break.